What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today's video, I'm going to be answering the age-old question of why is real estate so expensive right now? All right, so perfect scenario. You are looking to purchase a home. You're in the market for your first house, second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever the case is. You're in the market for a new place to call home. You got your mortgage, you got that pre-approval. You're like, whoa, these interest rates are insane. Anybody that you talk to in the industry, whether it's a real estate professional, friends and family who's gone through it themselves, regardless of who you talk to, everybody's going to tell you like, holy shit, don't buy a home right now. It's a bubble. It's crazy. Prices are high. You're out of your mind. So what are you left to do? Listen to the advice of professionals. Listen to some guy like myself on YouTube who's just making videos, who's also a real estate professional. No. Honestly, I don't have a clue. I'm going to tell you. I'm not so much going to answer the question of should you buy a home right now versus should you not buy a home right now. I'm really just going to kind of give you a little bit of information as to why real estate is so expensive right now as we sit here in 2021 as opposed to maybe last year or the year before or the year before that. Now, everybody's always looking for advice when it comes to these sort of things. However, I just want to throw the disclaimer out there. I am a licensed real estate agent. I do have a mortgage financing background. However, I would still talk to either a real estate attorney or anybody else in your sphere personally before you decide to make any moves into the real estate community. And if you're looking for some help, absolutely reach out to me. Link's going to be down in the description below. However, that's if you're in Ohio. I'm going to assume that not everybody who watches this video will be in this market or even in this state. So I'm going to kind of give you a little bit of information, a little bit of background. We're going to go all the way back to 2008, back when everybody just lost their minds with the housing market. So let's talk about that. 2008, right? Financial crisis. Everybody lost their jobs. There were a lot of people that got foreclosed on. There's been a couple movies, a couple little documentaries made about what really happened. Was it big banks? Was it self-employed individuals? Was it mortgage lenders? Like what was the key root of the cause in the 2008 financial crisis that was essentially kind of the tipping point for our economy back then? And that's really what I want to dive into today when I'm talking about this market that we're in currently versus pre-2008. Time travel, pre-2008, a lot of what you had that caused that financial disruption or the economic crisis then did not really have to do with sort of like a global pandemic, right? Like obviously if you're looking at black and white, you have pre-2008 versus right now, which we're kind of coming off of this like global pandemic, you know, if you've heard of COVID or any of that. Pre-2008, really the root cause of that was what's called subprime mortgages. So essentially mortgages were created and they were written and loans were given out to individuals who were not creditworthy, who could not repay these loans. And a lot of times they were forced unknowingly, unfortunately, into what are called like balloon mortgages or balloon payments. And it had a lot to do with a lot of the regulations with mortgage brokers who, if you're unfamiliar with what a mortgage broker is, you have the bank, you have the customer, and right here in the middle, you have a mortgage broker who kind of, handles everything in between. Now that mortgage broker would get paid by the bank to then bring them the customer, right? Now the mortgage brokers, don't ask me how this happened, would actually get paid more if they could bring an adjustable rate mortgage or an ARM or like a balloon payment to that lender. So the mortgage broker's here in the middle telling the consumer, hey, I got the best product, look at these low rates, everything's crazy, here's your payment, blah, 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 blah. You can buy 4 houses. And that's essentially what kind of caused that problem was you had a lot of individuals that were steered into loans unknowingly. You had a lot of them that were put into it and they didn't really ask questions because they're looking at their 485 credit score and they're just like, oh my gosh, I got this $500,000 home. Boom. Recipe for disaster, right? So then when that happens once, it happens over and over and over and over and over again. And then you have a lot of these large financial institutions buying what's called mortgage-backed securities, which are essentially like a security tied to these mortgage bonds. Now, they were supposed to be A-rated mortgages. However, a lot of these were way lower on the tier than that, hence the word subprime. And unfortunately, you had these banks that were buying a bunch of these and they held on to them and they held on to them. And then that bubble burst, right? You had a lot of balloon payments come. You had a lot of financial institutions that took a massive hit. Every lender in the game really got hit from that. Now, when that happened, you had foreclosures, you had a lot of people put out on the street, you had job losses, you just had everything, right? Like it just dominoed down because of that one sort of, shady lending institution, right? And then that just spiraled out of control. Like if you look at 2008, globally, it wasn't necessarily as impacted as it is right now with this pandemic, but it hit the United States rather largely, right? Because everybody here was affected by it who was a homeowner. So that's really what caused like the pre-2008, that like housing bubble or whatever you want to call it. Like that was literally physically like a bubble because of these subprime mortgages. They just kept getting stacked and stacked, and they had a deadline when a lot of these would like balloon and payments would be up and everything. So it was literally just waiting to just go boop, and it did. And a lot of people were left in the dark, jobless, homeless, you name it. It was awful. Now, fast forward to today. Obviously, we had a global pandemic. COVID-19 pretty much put the entire world on red alert, shut down everything. I mean, back a year ago, we're sitting at kind of the end of April, beginning of May here in 2021. But this time last year, we still really had no idea what this was going to do. We didn't know what this was going to impact, and so on. So, in the housing industry, though, what happened was, a lot of homes got pulled off market. A lot of sellers said, you know what, pandemic, I'm protecting my family. I don't want a lot of strangers coming into my house. We're going to stop selling our house. Now, looking at the data, at least here in our market in Central Ohio, it's pretty similar across the board nationwide, but here in Ohio, what you were looking at is about year over year, April to April last year, 2020 to April 2021 this year, we have about 50% less inventory. Now, when you're looking at what's going on with the housing market right now, it's not so much of a bubble getting ready to burst. It's pretty much just basic economics, supply and demand, right? Like you have this huge demand for housing, just massive demand for housing. And we'll get to a little bit more of that in just a second. But the supply over here, obviously equal, things are good, but you have huge demand and a very, very, very low supply, like 50% less supply. With, I don't even know what sort of demand we've increased on, but it's a huge demand, right? So very, very off-kiltered. So that leads to a huge seller's market. Everything that you've heard where, homes are selling for $50,000 to $100,000 over. Famously out in California, there was one that sold for over $1 million over the ask price. Look up that story, it's pretty insane. However, here in Central Ohio, it's very, very common. I'm working with a lot of buyers. I'm telling them, when we're looking, especially if they're in like an A area school district, whatever the case is, really just anywhere, immediately whatever the list price is, 10 to 20,000, above that is best case scenario right now. And that's just me speaking from experience and what I'm seeing. Now with that, most of these deals are going to still be financed, right? So they're going to have to get a bank loan for this. Now, when you go that high above list price, you're left with appraisal issues that you might run into. So people are, buyers essentially right now are having to cover appraisal gaps. Now, whether they waive it or they can cover 10 grand, it's pretty much whatever they have in the bank determines how much they can afford to go up on that appraisal gap. Now with that, you just have a lot of craziness going on, right? So it really is important, especially now. I know that a lot of people are trying to sell their house for sale by owner, and that's fine. Like, you do you. However, if you're a buyer, man, just please do not go into this unrepresented. Just don't go down to your neighbor Karen and be like, yo, I really think that I want to buy your house. Let's just write up some contracts, right? Like I'll just pull out a piece of paper. We'll just write up a contract that I printed off of Google. Don't do that, please. Consult a real estate professional like myself or any of the other great agents that are in your state, your country, whatever the case is. Because I'm telling you now more than ever, things get very, very gray very quickly when you're in this type of market, and you can really, really do yourself a financial disservice if you don't. So off the soapbox there, let's get back to the nitty gritty. So again, going back to our model of supply and demand, right? Huge demand for houses and very, very, very low supply. The supply right now is slowly working its way back up, but until it really comes back up and people are really just selling their house, you're going to be left with this huge imbalance, right? Now, some have argued, I personally think that the really, really low level of supply right now is because most of the time when people have to sell their home, they also have to purchase another one. And a lot of times people are like, well, this is great if I'm a seller, but then I have to turn around and buy in this market, and I know that side of it's crazy. Which they're not really wrong. However, with the right guidance and the right professional to lead you down the way, you can definitely get into a home and still not overpay, even though you're going to be paying over like list price and stuff like that, where appreciation is going. You're not going to like overpay, if that makes sense. But like I said, until this supply and demand thing kind of equals out, we're going to be stuck in this sort of limbo where homes are crazy expensive and it just seems like crazy. And it's just like everybody's in a WWE cage match for every single listing that comes onto the market, right? Now, why is the demand so high, you might ask? That's kind of a loaded question, right? You have the overarching one, time, right? Like right now, I think USA Today did a great story on it. I'll see if I can link it down in the description below. They're actually talking about how obviously we're coming into this era where, you know, millennials are looking to purchase a home, right? So you have a lot of these like big life events and sort of this time frame that has led up to where we are. And you have a lot of people that are just interested in buying a home right now, whether it's their first home or maybe they bought a home and they're looking to sell that one, take advantage of the market, buy another one, whatever the case is. You have a lot of that that's kind of underlying all of this. But the biggest reason that I personally believe that the demand's still so high is because interest rates are insanely low. I mean, they hit record lows. I mean, there was a time, you know, maybe a few months ago where you could get a 30-year fixed mortgage. 2.75 was like the average rate. I had a lot of clients that were seeing like 2.5, 2.625, right? And that's 30-year fixed, which is just insane. Compared to like 2 years ago when we were in the fours, when you're talking the difference of like a percentage on your interest rate, your monthly payment, depending on the price point, could change anywhere from, you know, maybe $50 to $75, all the way to like $100, couple $100, maybe even like $500, depending on your purchase price. So interest rates, even though again, kind of like supply, they're steadily going up, right? We have interest rates now at like 3.25, 3.25. That's still insanely low. And even though it's not a record low and they've been here before, that's still such a good rate to lock in at for 30-year fixed mortgages. And if you do a 15-year mortgage, it's even less than that, right? So you have a lot of factors that are increasing this demand, but those are kind of the two big ones that we have right now. So when you're looking at it, pre-2008 versus today, everybody's like always like, oh, well, right now, you know, there's this housing bubble and it's just going to pop and everybody's going to be overpaying for houses and they're going to lose appreciation. Look at history, right? Consistently for the last, since this data is being tracked, right? Consistently for like the last 50 to 60 years, homes have appreciated, right? Homes appreciate, money, you know, you have inflation, but homes appreciate over time. Unlike a car, for example, where you drive it off the lot and you immediately lose like 30% of its value, right? That's what's called a depreciating asset, whereas a house is an appreciating aspect. That sounded weird. It's an appreciating asset, right? So very, very different things. Pre-2008, that was literally a bubble. That was a bubble getting ready to burst. Some could argue that the cryptocurrency market right now is a bubble. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I can barely describe to you how cryptocurrency in a nutshell could scale to a global economy, so I'm not going to. However, when it comes to houses and homes and appreciation rates, that I do know, and I'm telling you right now, we're just kind of at an off balance between supply and demand, and when they get closer to being leveled out, that's when we'll kind of see that return to normalcy that we all know and love, because change is scary and home prices going through the roof is also scary. Now, also what we have to attribute this to, another piece that I wanted to talk about is building materials. I mean, building materials are through the roof. I think I saw a statistic the other day. I think this came out of the New York Times. Again, I'm gonna link these in the description below. But it was like the average cost of a deck or the materials to make a deck, like a standard, I don't even remember what it was, like maybe an 8x8 deck, right? This time last year with lumber prices was like just under $1,000. It was like $900 and some dollars, right? The same building materials for the same size deck right now are almost $4,000. That's like a 4x increase on building materials alone. So if you're looking at trying to buy a home and you're like, wow, I'm not really finding anything on the resale market, let's go buy a new home, you're gonna be looking possibly at like another $75,000 to $100,000 on your build price just because of the building materials, right? And that's not even talking about the markup that contractors can put in right now because of this fun thing called supply and demand. So building materials are also a thing that are kind of getting crazy. And there's a lot of reasons why building materials are expensive. Global pandemic, shipping, tariffs on other countries where a lot of this imported material comes from, or this material is imported from, I should say. So there's a lot of things that are kind of underlying there. There's not really one to pinpoint. However, building materials through the roof right now. So keep that in mind if you're going to kind of explore maybe the new build route as well. So that kind of brings us to the wrap up of this video. How does this get fixed? Does the bubble pop? Is there even a bubble? Well, as I've kind of already mentioned, in my professional opinion, there's not really like a bubble, right? Like there's not a bubble that's going to cause this to just pop, right? And then it's like, oh, things are normal again. And oh, we have this massive increase of supply. I think it's going to take time. I think it's going to take another year, maybe 2 years before we really start to see, demand I think is always going to be higher than the supply just because we're always making new people, but we can't necessarily keep up with building homes, at least again in my market. So I think it's going to slowly level itself back out to kind of being that traditional market where instead of maybe having 55 offers on one property, you may have 2 or 3 on a new listing, right? I think we're going to see some normalcy start to return to the market when the interest rates kind of go back to where they are because our economy might be stabilizing a little bit. If interest rates go back up to, 3.5, 3 3/4, you're probably going to see, the demand come down a little bit when supply is going up. So that's how it really gets fixed is you kind of balance it out. It's just a time thing. So start looking at your clock, start marking your calendar. If you are interested in purchasing a home, like I said, consult with a real estate professional. They're going to guide you through the process, and we're here to essentially just help you navigate the entire process and make it as easy as possible for you. So thank you very much for tuning in. Drop me one of these if you can, please. It helps with the algorithm. Smash that subscribe button as well if you haven't already. And if you enjoy more personalized kind of finance related videos like this in my profession, aka real estate, as well as some of the men's lifestyle videos that I put out as well, make sure to hit that subscribe button like I mentioned. Drop below in the comments if you found this video interesting and would like to see more videos like it. I'd love to kind of give an array of videos on my knowledge with things like real estate, credit, anything like that. I'd love to do it, so put it in the comments below. Thanks again for tuning in, guys. Stay tuned until the next one. Peace!